and welcome to this week's edition of Africa 360. I'm your host, Kwangu Liwewe. One Zambia, one nation. The year was 1964. And this was the motto that defined the aspirations of a country liberated from colonial domination. This week on Africa 360, we focus on Zambia's Golden Jubilee and what 50 years of independence has brought to Zambia.
An historic moment which gave birth to the new independent Zambia. It was what Zambians had been waiting for after years of colonial rule. President Kenneth Kaunda, the founding father of the Zambian nation, came into power. It was an era of renewed hope and new aspirations. 50 years later, Zambians can look back with pride on how far their southern African country has come and re-examine the values that bind them despite the differences. One of the key achievements since independence has been peace and stability. But not everyone is impressed, particularly with the social and economic progress of the past 5 decades. Many are concerned the country still has high levels of poverty despite its abundant mineral wealth. There's been sustained annual economic growth of 5% in recent years, but this does not seem to have benefited ordinary citizens. According to the 2014 United Nations Development Programme's Human Development Report, about 62.8% of the population live in abject poverty, and a further 18.7% are at risk of falling into poverty. The country also faces high unemployment levels. The current leadership has not been spared criticism. There are widespread concerns that the ruling party, led by President Michael Sata, has failed to fulfill promises it made in the 2011 elections. One of those promises was to draw up a new constitution, something Zambians are still waiting for. As part of the Jubilee celebrations, government has lined up various activities. It's optimistic that the event will be a resounding success. But many are asking what Zambia needs to do to overcome the current challenges and what it will look like 50 years from now.
5 decades, 5 presidents, each leaving a unique legacy. We spoke to Zambia's 4th democratically elected president, Rupia Banda. He shared his reflections on Zambia's independence and the leadership challenges the country faces. So thank you very much for speaking to Africa 360. Let's take a walk down memory lane. You were there in October 1964 when Zambia gained independence. Just take us back. What was it like in terms of the euphoria and expectations?
Well, it's very difficult to say it in words, but we were extremely excited. On the 24th of October 1964, we were then very young people, myself and many others. Even Dr. Kaunda himself was very young. And I can remember that particular day that people were so excited everywhere, and everybody was glued to the television, and those of us who were inside the stadium, at Independence Stadium, we were waiting for the moment when the British flag would come down and ours go up, and a big uproar all over the country.
A lot of critics say Zambian presidents have too much power, and they're saying out of the 50 years, more than half of that was spent under one-party democracy. That was under Dr. Kaunda. Then came in President Frederick Chiluba, and they're saying he was also powerful. And then now they're talking about the current government, saying they've got a lot of power and they're reverting to authoritarian rule. Now, my question to you is, 20 years on, do you think we're going backwards when it comes to democracy in the country?
Yes, it is possible that the criticism made against presidents, and I was one of them, and we must accept criticism. It is possible that we have too much power, but that's a product of the constitution of the day. And that is why I think you see that a lot of our people, the Zambian people, actively considering a new constitution, which hopefully will reduce this power and share this power with the other institutions within the country.
Now let's talk about you, sir. You were stripped of your immunity in 2011. We look at other politicians in the country. Nervous Mumba of the MMD as well. He's been arrested on various charges in the past. We look at the president of UPND as well. Is there a witch hunt in Zambia when it comes to the opposition?
Certainly there is a problem there. I mean, for me, I can't say there isn't, because I was stripped of my immunity in a very peculiar way. You would imagine that this is a very important decision to make. Mine was made within, I think, a period of 2 hours. The opposition tried to say, look, we need to discuss this, we need to understand this, and so on before we make that decision. But there was pressure from certain groups within the country that they must remove my immunity, because that would then enable them to investigate me. And they said during the debate, if you recall, they said that they have investigated and that they are satisfied that I had done certain irregular things and that they would prosecute me. Then we went to court. That evidence has never come up.
Now, in terms of the other leaders of the opposition as well, is this a witch hunt?
Certainly. All of us. I am the leader of the others in terms of persecution. I have received the worst persecution, but all the other opposition leaders, let me just say the people of Zambia, if they are to have a meeting, as of now, they have to ask for permission.
That's the Public Order Act.
The Public Order Act, an old and antiquated draconian law, which we had forgotten about, but they've brought it about. And you recall also that we just had an election, which resulted in the election of our current president, His Excellency President Sata, and all the ministers. We accepted defeat in the election. We expected him to carry on. But what did they do? They didn't contest his seat to say, let's find out if he really won or find out if I really lost. But instead, they started petitions against members of parliament. We've never had this number of petitions against the ruling party and against the former ruling party, or now the opposition party, including the UPND opposition parties. And all of them have been forced to go back to by-elections, and most of them have been won by the ruling party. So can you imagine what would happen if we had another election and the next leaders did the same thing? Will our country ever go forward?
Still talking about leadership in Zambia, we saw President Chiluba go after former President Kaunda, and then we saw President Mwanawasa go after Chiluba, and now President Sata is going after you. Now, is this a sign of vindictiveness, or is it a sign that Zambian leaders have all been corrupt during their term in office?
We are not born from the same parents, so it can't be a product of, like a family product. It's a product of continuation of the same thing, people not being critical. Why must every leader who comes face like what I'm facing now? Or why should the next leader even fear to put his name up for election for fear of being persecuted the same way as I am being persecuted? I hope that we can put a stop to this.
And finally, what is your message to Zambians on this occasion?
Well, this is a very important occasion for Zambians, and I think that we must first of all thank them, the Zambian people, that in spite of all these problems we've just discussed now, we are one country that has never had an armed conflict. A touch wood never happens to us. We've always found a way to resolve our problems in a peaceful manner. And I think we must celebrate these 50 years, take into account that all our citizens have always tolerated each other and are waited for elections in order to make the changes that they want. I think that it's so important for Zambians to continue, because we're an inland country and we're surrounded by many, many countries, so much so that the problems that arise in those countries somehow have an impact on us. But in spite of that, Zambia has remained peaceful.
Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kaunda.
Do stay with us, because after the break, we talk to the current leadership of Zambia and we look at the challenges that persist 50 years since independence. Don't go away.
No, I mean, I don't comment on speculation. I mean, the speculation on his health is largely social media, which I would regard as malicious.
Welcome back to Africa 360. Let's continue our reflection on Zambia's 50 years of independence. We've spoken to leaders of the past. Now let's hear from the leaders of the present. Joining me now from Lusaka is Zambia's Vice President, Guy Scott. Good day, sir, and thank you for joining us on Africa 360.
Kwangu, good morning or good evening, whatever it is. Maybe I'm saying the wrong thing, but welcome to my office.
Thank you, sir. It's now been 3 years since the Patriotic Front-led government has been in power, and yet some are accusing your government of intolerance and basically erasing the democratic strides the country made post-1991, until, of course, PF took power. They're citing examples such as the Public Order Act and a clampdown on opposition parties. What's your reaction to this, sir?
My reaction to that is that it's a load of hooey. I mean, it's politics. In this country, we had, for example, the first party, the United National Independence Party of Kenneth Kaunda, which operated for 27 years under a state of emergency, during which you could be locked up indefinitely on no charge. We had the MMD took its place, the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy. We brought in 2 terms of state of emergency, locked up people left, right and centre on very minimal evidence. And now we've got to the Patriotic Front, which has got no state of emergency, and which, while the Public Order Act may occasionally annoy people who don't agree with the local police as to what's a safe way to hold a meeting, we hold elections, by-elections and local elections the whole time in this country, and there's no complaint that I've encountered of the police stopping or the government stopping a single public meeting. So I think it's largely heavily exaggerated for political effect.
Now, sir, the Patriotic Front pledged to enact a new constitution within 90 days of winning the election. We've seen numerous deadlines. They've come and gone, and it's now 3 years down the line. Where exactly is this constitution now?
There is no point in having a fight over a constitution. We appointed within 90 days the committee whose job it was to review all the evidence of all the commissions that had ever been held about a new constitution, and we went ahead and appointed them. They then took longer than 90 days and then came with a massive document which is very difficult to know how to handle. So that is what's happening. Again, it's politics. If we were sincere, and everybody was sincere, about saying let's have a new constitution, we could have one next week. But the problem is it's being used as a political weapon, and you can't use constitutions like that.
But, sir, is there a time frame as to when Zambians can expect to see a new constitution? Do you think it's likely we'll see one before 2016?
You may see changes to the present constitution. I mean, the way constitutions normally change, or in many countries they change, is you bring amendments. For example, the current constitution under which we are operating right now, the one which happens to exclude me from standing for the presidency on the grounds that my father and mother were not Zambians, that was amended to introduce that restriction in 1996, together with another restriction excluding chiefs, traditional chiefs. It was actually aimed at Kenneth Kaunda by the MMD government of the time. So that was an amendment to the Constitution which has far-reaching implications. If our colleagues in the opposition would like to sit down and decide what's important and what's not important, we can do it almost next week. We can amend, and that is the most logical way to do it. But to take a huge document which is 3 times the size of the current Constitution to the people throughout a place 3 times the size of the United Kingdom and try to get a clear majority is not a practical way of proceeding.
So we've seen an unprecedented speculation about President Satta's health and his appearance at public events. How is he, and do we expect to see him to give a keynote speech at the celebration ceremonies on October the 24th?
I would predict, I think, fairly confidently that he'd make some remarks on the 24th or the 23rd, more likely, which is the welcoming dinner at State House. and I would expect to see him continue to be president after that. I don't know quite what you're trying to get out of me.
But obviously, we need a comment on you on the speculation about his health.
No, I mean, I don't comment on speculation. I mean, the speculation on his health is largely social media, which I would regard as malicious, and also hiding behind invisibility cloaks. I mean, if a responsible publication were to make allegations about Mr. Sata's health, I would respond as best I can, because after all, I'm not his medical spokesman. But I mean, if some irresponsible journals or so-called journals are going to do it, I don't see why I should respond. It's just giving encouragement to bad journalism.
Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for speaking to Africa 360. Welcome back. You're watching Africa 360. This week, we're focusing on Zambia as the country celebrates 50 years of independence. A warm welcome to Mulea Mwananyanda, who is the Deputy Regional Director at Amnesty International. Jennifer Njelesani, a Zambian professional, and a Zambian academic, Dr. Kambindima Wotela. Now, let's start with you, Doctor. Zambians pride themselves for having peace and no civil war since they gained independence October the 24th, 1964. But actually, when we talk about that peace, does it have any multiplier effect on Zambia's economy or prosperity?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, we've come a long way, and I think a lot of progress have been made as a country. Yes, in the absence of peace, obviously there has been a price to pay, and that's much more to do with the socio-economic, and probably I should also add the political development in the country. But as much as we can try and talk about that, I think most of the time we haven't scripted the success that we've actually had to do, as well as the challenges. Could we overcome them? And the answer is quite yes.
Maybe you can come in, Jennifer, here and talk more about the peace versus prosperity in Zambia.
I think peace is always a good thing, and peace gives us a platform to start on, as opposed to us spending a lot of time, effort, and funds on war. The funds and the efforts have been used to develop the country. The question is, has the development been fast enough? And that is, I think, what we should be asking ourselves. Have we developed fast enough for a 50-year-old nation?
Mulea, what do you think about that?
I do agree with what's been said here by Kambindima and Jennifer. I think that there is a lot that can be done in Zambia, and one of the major issues for me is the rise of inequality in Zambia. I mean, there is economic growth. We are told 6% economic growth annually, but if you compare that to the rate of inequality in Zambia, it's quite massive, and it's one of the most unequal societies even in our region at the minute. And I was just reading recently a report by 3 UN agencies, IFAD, WFP, and the Food and Agriculture Organization. And they have just said that the levels of undernourishment in Zambia are really puzzling. It's only second to Haiti in the whole world, meaning that even countries like Mali, for example, are more nourished than we are in a peaceful country. So there's a lot that can be done, and there's a lot to do.
We've had 4 successive governments. We've got a current one now. Who, in your opinion, got it right in these 50 years?
Yes, I mean, we shouldn't forget as well that Zambia has played a really important role in this region, and that all our governments actually have contributed to the changes that have happened across the region. Kenneth Kaunda was part of the liberation movement. Frederick Chiluba played a really constructive role in foreign relations. For example, the peace processes in Angola in 1994, leading to the Lusaka Peace Accord. In 1998, he also played a leading role in what was happening then in DRC. And this has continued across all of the presidents. What we're saying, though, is that despite all of these things, there is something that we could do better, and that is to increase the level of human development in the country, as well as to increase people's freedoms, the ability to be able to just express yourself, which I think has been diminishing over the years. But let's not forget the role that Zambia has played in liberating the sub-region.
Doc, maybe you can come in here. We've looked at the various presidents that have held the helm in Zambia over the past 15 years. But there seems to be a trend that when one president leaves, he prosecutes his predecessor. My question here is, are Zambian leaders basically corrupt, or are they just vindictive?
I think there's an aspect of being vindictive because of the premature maturity in which we introduced multi-party politics in Zambia. If you follow the way all democracy has actually developed, it's become developed when there is an inclusive society that is able to fund most of their activities, as well as probably even run their own governments without having to get government money. But what we have at the moment is people riding the tide of what I call the poverty of politics. So you get to that power, then you also want to safeguard so that you stay there for a long time. The best you can do is to kill the most immediate opponent. And if you've noticed, what is actually happening is that most of the politicians are not winning at a very big majority. So the only way out is to make sure that you destroy the previous party. And who would you start with? You start with the head of that particular party, so that as they're concentrating on their head, they're actually getting disorganized. If you've seen what happened to UNIP, it got disorganized. MMD's gotten disorganized. And I think if the PF also left power, they're going to be a very disorganized party.
Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts, I think the way that things are currently happening might be the ends is right, but the means that they're going about it is wrong. And I think what government should do is better to strengthen and make oversight bodies like the Auditor General and the Public Accounts Committee more autonomous and more independent, so that whilst the governments are still in power, the people know what has happened with their money. But at the moment, the transparency does not really seem to be there. It could, or rather, it is there, but it could be enhanced. And then we won't get to a place where when one party comes out of power, the next government starts prosecuting the previous government.
And I agree with the point that it's a strong point about strengthening our institutions. And part of the problem is because of the way our constitution is structured, which places so much power in the presidency. But there are also extrajudicial powers outside the presidency, where it's in our psyche that everything has to be approved by the president. And so even public officials owe their allegiance to the president and not to the constitution. So it's a massive structural problem. It's not even a problem about Michael Sata or Rupia Banda. It is a real structural problem that needs to be sorted out at base.
That's the key thing. There's been a draft constitution in Zambia. I mean, they've been discussing this for almost 10 years and it still hasn't come out.
Yeah, I mean, the constitution is an instrument of power. And whoever wants to consolidate that power has to depend on the constitution. And I think all the presidents have discovered that Kaunda's constitution actually puts so much power on the presidency. So who wants to leave that power behind? And that's why there's been a lot of drag. And I don't see us actually having a new constitution even by 2016, because already there's discussions that the next elections are going to be held under the constitution that was in the First Republic, which is actually the Second Republic rather, which is quite a shame, because what we need, as Mle has put it, is a constitution that distributes the power to the people who are the key beneficiaries in Zambia.
Jennifer, looking forward to the next 50 years, what do you think the main challenges will be for Zambia?
We talked about inequality. We have to get to a point where there is some semblance of equality in our nation. We are not that many, and we have, I think, enough resources to look after everyone. The challenge to the government and to everyone is, how do we make sure that there's a balance in the way resources are distributed?
Malaya, your last thoughts on the next 50 years for the country?
Yeah, my last thoughts really are about, the respect for human rights, the provision of basic services like education, like health, so that we do not have people fly out of the country every time there's an emergency, but those things can actually be taken care of at home. And I do think that we can do that.
Are you optimistic that Zambia can achieve the equality and access to health services, education and other issues?
Definitely. All we need is a very good organizational plan. And this, I imply, we need to first of all go back to the basics, culture. Then we move to politics. Then we move to economics. Then we move to social. Then we come to environmental. And in addition, we need a transition government. We have to treat politicians like they are a board. and leave the executive to run the country.
Thank you to my guests, Mulea Mwananyanda, Jennifer Njelesani, and Dr. Kabindima Wotela. And that brings us to the end of yet another edition of Africa 360. Please share your views on our discussion today, and you can join the conversation on Facebook or tweet us your views at Africa360_ENCA. You can also send an email to africa360@enca.com. So until next time, it's goodbye for now. Thanks for watching.